the second chapter today. So a lot for 2 chapters, but I think we've covered some really good stuff. And hopefully helped answer some questions that people might have in why sin is allowed and who allows sin and how that all works through God's direction. So we're going to start here where we ended last week in verse 10. So Job 2 and verse 10 through 13, through the end of the chapter. Somebody wants to read that.
He said to her, thou speakest well, the foolish woman speaketh. What? Shall receive good from the hand of God, shall not receive evil. In all this is not Job sin from his lips. Now Job's 3 friends heard of all the evil that has come upon him. They came everyone from his own place, Eliphaz, Jeremiah, and Bildad, Shimei, and so far as the Naamite. For they had made an appointment together to come and to mourn with him and comfort him. It was lifted up their eyes afar off, they knew not. They lifted up their voice and wept, and they ran every one to the mountain and spread dust upon their heads toward heaven. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was very great.
So last week we touched on Job's answer to his wife here and kind of what that was all about, what he was really doing, just redirecting her maybe. And then we talked a little bit about that we didn't talk much about, but he says, what shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? So he's sharing that just because we've received good in the past doesn't mean everything in the future is going to be good. Everything's going to be great for us. That we should understand that we're going to have challenges in life. But then the writer says something for us here. He says, in all this did not Job sin with his lips. So what do you think that means?
I have 2 thoughts. The first is going back to what you just said in terms of shall we not receive the good and also receive the bad? Think about all the good that God has done for Job all the years. Right? And so he's saying to his wife, look at the blessings that we've had for so long. This is one day of turbulence, as bad as it is. It's one day of turbulence. Can we not endure one day of bad because of all the blessings of God? I think that's an interesting perspective that so many of us may forget, is that I've had a bad day. It may be the worst day I've ever had, but I've had blessings. And I think that ties back into, you look at the Israelites coming out of Egyptian bondage. God has brought them out of Egyptian bondage. How long did it take for them to start saying, we want to go back? Look it up. The tyranny we were running back there today over here, complaining, lying, and all these things, becoming victims. And they neglect God and what God did. Right? He says a bunch of snakes to bite. Right? God will show you what that is if you want to be a victim and not glorify God for you. Right? And so that's the first thing I thought about reading that again. And the second thing is, when he didn't sin with his lips, what's the first thing that we oftentimes run when things go bad? Our mouth, right?
Yep.
Job, we know Job said not.
Yes. Right.
But Job may have had some inward thoughts and inward feelings about anger going on with him. But where does the sin occur is when he starts speaking out loud to others, like broadcasting things. So Job may have questioned things that were happening to him, but instead of questioning
Yeah, I think those are both good thoughts. And I think that this is more of a way of speaking than it is to say Job didn't sin. We know Job wasn't sinless. Um, but it's more of a way of speaking about this specific situation. We don't know what his sins were otherwise, but in this situation, he decided that in his heart first, because you don't say anything without your heart feeling it first. So he decided in his heart that we can receive good and we can receive evil, So I think that this is just a figure of speech. Because God and the writer have already shared that Job was perfect and upright and one who feared God and eschewed evil. Not that he was perfect, sinless, but that his heart was in the right place at all times. And that way, even when you do sin, you're directed back toward God. So this is a reference, I think, also to Job eschewing evil. So the writer's trying to share with us that not only am I telling you that he did this, but also I'm saying this is what he said, and then in all this, Job did not sin with his lips. So I feel like this is saying, and there's no way to prove this, but it feels like it's saying in this situation, for this occurrence, he did not sin. He didn't blame it on God. He didn't blame it on, he didn't take Satan's responsibility away. So this eschewing evil is literally making a habit of avoiding evil. So this is just Job's habit. His habit is avoid evil all the time. So then the writer notes that the things that happen to Job are evil, connecting them back to Satan. So in this next verse, it says, now Job's three friends heard of all this evil that was come upon him. So the writer is telling us that this was evil. His friends thought this was evil. He thought this was evil. God thought this was evil. So it's important for us to remember that this was Satan and that what happened to Job was not just normal circumstances of God's natural law. So it might be confusing at some point because God's natural law included some of these things that happened to Job. So some of these things like the fire that came from the sky, the winds, those are God's natural law. These things aren't innately evil. These are things that just occur. But they were evil because Satan was allowed to take them over and use them for his purpose. So why were the parts of this that may have been a part of natural law considered evil? So it's because Satan controlled them. Satan took these things that were, disease and wind and then other people's hearts deciding to steal, those things. Satan used these. That's why that was considered evil.
Is money evil?
Right.
Money is amoral. How it's used is what makes it good or bad. Take money and give to charity or build a hospital or do different things. Right? Take money, either drugs or build up an evil empire of wickedness. How those things are used in that moment determines whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, it's like for us, we don't have the power. We're not allowed to use the power that Satan did. but we still have power from God. We could go kill somebody, or we could steal from somebody. We have God's power that He gave us. The limitation is what God gave us. The same way Satan was allowed to do certain things. We can turn something some power that we have, in our case is probably more not considered great power just because it's part of God's natural law. But we have strength. We have things that God has given us that allow us. We have a mind that allows us to decide to go and fight God, to go against what God says. God tells Satan that Job is this type of person. And then Satan says, well, just because of this, let me take care of this and everything will be good. He'll come over to my side. So I think that we have to remember that although God allows us to commit evil, although God allows Satan to commit evil, using his power, that it's evil because of the purpose in the heart of the individual.
If you connect it to what it says in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 6, you see all these things that are happening to Job, and we want to make a comparison to what happens in our own life. Hebrews 6 doesn't say that whom the Lord loves, He chastens or scourges.
Right.
Job is entering in all these sufferings. In this scenario or in this account, we have a conversation or an adversary, the devil is trying to prove God wrong. But in the overall scope of God's love, He wants to forge people through fire, right? To make them stronger. And that's what God does to everyone that He loves. To each and every one of us here, we are going to be chastened or scourged to make us stronger at some point. It might not be to the greatest degree that Job was, but there are bits that God's going to do because it's not tempting or testing us, but it's to make us stronger.
Yeah, there's several places in the Bible where, being tested by fire is a blessing. We should be counted a blessing. We should count it a blessing when we can resist. So the blessing is that we are tested and then we resist that. And that's what Job's done here. So I just thought that was something to bring out there. So let's move on. Let's move on to Job's friends and look at them for a little while. I'm hoping you guys have some thoughts on them, especially here. I think we see the best side of his friends at this point, starting in verse 11. It says, "Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off, and knew him not, they lifted up their voice and wept. They rent every one his mantle and sprinkled dust upon their heads toward heaven. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was great." So there's probably some time in here, some significant amount of time, that first of all, the calamity that happened to his flocks and to his children, that occurred at some point in the past. We don't know how far back. But then he has become ill and we went through all the infirmities last week of what happened to him. So there's probably at least a minimal, significant amount of time, 2 or 3 months, of illness. He's already lost weight. He's not able to eat. So his friends have heard about it. His friends are probably, similar to him in their own places. So it's not just like they can go, okay, Joe, something's happened to Joe. I'm going to take the day off and be right back. So they've got to travel. So they made plans with each other. That took some time. They've got to make sure everything's taken care of back home. So they've got to get everything set up. And then they take the time to travel. And they travel together. And they make an appointment to come and mourn. So that they not only make an appointment with each other, but with Job, And so they come down the road toward Job, and they see him afar off. They don't know who he is. They don't recognize him. These are good friends of Job, and they don't even recognize him because he is so maybe covered with boils, emaciated, all these things they can't tell it's Job. And because they know it's Job, they rent their clothes and pour dust on their head and weep. They lift up their voice. So they're crying, they're upset with the situation. And then they sit down with Job for 7 days and 7 nights. None of them spake word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. So what are some of the things that we can gain from the scripture here when dealing with a friend in illness or in calamity? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've heard it both ways in terms of friends. One, that they were doing their best to try to comfort him. And two, despite doing their best they weren't doing it right. Whichever way, it's just a yes or however you look at it. But you think about people that you may have tried to comfort, or people that may have tried to comfort you in times of distress. It falls short. It's usually, what can you say to someone that's lost so much, or lost something of great value in your life, someone of great value in your life, and it's a difficult thing to do. But I think the thought is what matters to a lot of people that are seeing that, and I appreciate their efforts to try to comfort.
Yeah.
They are obviously concerned for Job to travel from all parts of the country to be right. It's great effort, concern for him. I think it's something that we need to consider to do our best to try to comfort those in need.
Right. So what else do you think that he did well? So they were concerned about him. What did they do well here that we know of, that we can see? What do you think you would have been not happy to see, but you would have been at least felt like they cared? Let me see here.
The customary thing that people did over grief, when it says they rent their mantle, that was a practice of old. To show your misfortune, things like that. Putting dust on the head, or dust up, right. They did all the ceremonial or customary things that would signify that we're here with you in great distress and seeing these things carefully.
So there's some value to ceremony. We have certain ceremonies too. We'll have a funeral or whatever whatever way that we decide to remember a person. So being a part of those ceremonies is something valuable. And then the custom they had of ripping their clothes, and that's exactly what Job did. So they're doing exactly what Job did. They are showing that they are concerned. They're so concerned that they do exactly the same thing that Job did. They're very upset, or they're at least showing they're very upset. So what else you see that was really good about what they did? Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the best things for me, I think I've told you before, my friend killed himself back in 2002. And longtime friend, early childhood friend, we hadn't been around each other much, but I remember one of the greatest feelings I had when I went to his funeral. We were talking, 2 or 3 friends of his, and I were talking about, the times that we remember, the things that we did together, the things that I felt like I was kind of losing because he wouldn't be there. Nobody would know because he wasn't there anymore. Because there were things that just he and I did together, or maybe another friend that they would talk about something. But I got to talking, and I just talked for like 2 hours. And I didn't realize it, but one of the friends pointed behind me, and the whole family, maybe like 60 or 70 people, had just stopped talking to each other, and we're just coming around and listening to stories that I was telling about what we did. I think I met him when I was 10, and probably, I think, what age were we in 2002? 30s. Anyway, 33, I think. So anyway, but I remember that nobody was, even my friends, even the people who had been around me, they just stopped talking. They were just like, okay, something's going on here. It was really amazing to me that everybody listened, and his mom was standing right behind me, and when I got done, she said, I never knew all that. Because nobody knew. Because who's going to know what you do with another person if you don't talk about it with someone? Because we did so much together. We spent so much time together. And I was feeling a little like that was wasted time. Like, well, if you're going to kill yourself, then, you wasted all my time. I don't have anybody to talk to about that. I noticed the same thing happens to older people. Leo's aunt, when she was getting older, she was in her 90s, she kind of just was upset all the time. And so we finally got down to what it was, and that it was that everybody she knew, everybody she had done things with, everybody she could talk about the good old days with, they were all gone. And so it was difficult for her, so she would become quiet. And I think at times we forget being quiet, especially for as long as these people were, 7 days and 7 nights. I don't know how they did that. I know that time was different then, and they had planned to be here for a long time. So, and if you think about it, I've listened to Job probably 20 times now in preparing for this lesson on YouTube. And it only takes about 3 hours, a little under 3 hours, to listen to all of Job. So when you're speaking, that time can go by really fast. So 7 days and 7 nights compared to almost 3 hours of speaking, that went on. And we don't know what period of time that actually took, but I'm just saying, this isn't, even though this book is significant space of time, there was a long time where they didn't speak. And I realized that sometimes I just needed somebody to listen and not talk to me, because when I went through my friend's death, I was a lot of times consumed in my own thought and just spending much time by myself, which probably wasn't good, but when friends were there, it was great for them to just be there and not say, oh no, that's, you're wrong about that, arguing with you, I guess, which is something that kind of happens here with Joe. But I think that's an amazing thing that they did, to recognize that they needed to just sit there. And I don't know if that was part of the ceremonial kind of whatever was done in those days, but it feels like this was a little bit extra. This was a little bit something else.
And for everybody, it's different. How people grieve or are comforted can be different. And when you look at this account, you look back to Joseph and what he did with Jacob, his father had. They mourned for 7 days.
Yeah.
Customary thing. Here they said on the earth for 7 days, customary thing. Just signifying the completeness, giving them time to mourn, grieve, do what they need to do, to hopefully get back on the track of their life. Somehow being carried on in a way.
Right. Any other thoughts?
It's just, when we think about losing one person, he lost everybody in that sense. So all his children.
Right.
It's like sorrow, not to losing just one, not
Yeah.
everybody all at once.
Yeah, I don't think I could imagine it, especially any younger than I was. I still felt invincible at that age. Even though older, I'd had some family members die that they were much older. You felt like they made it their entire life. Yeah, it's a challenging thing to deal with for sure. So what are some things that you might do to support others in difficult situations? Let's look at 2 Corinthians 1, verses 3 and 4. Somebody wants to read that. 2 Corinthians 1, 3 and 4.
Blessed be God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulations, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with comfort with which ourselves are comforted by God.
So this is telling us that we should be looking to comfort those around us as God comforts us. So even if that individual can't be strong, that person can't do what they need to see who God is and that He's comforting, if you'll allow Him to, that we need to step in. We need to step in as a proxy for God, in service of God, and help comfort that person in times of trouble. And, like everyone said, do you know what do you do to comfort that person? different for everyone. Everybody handles the situation differently. But we should be using God's comfort for us in times when we're strong to comfort those who are weak in their tribulation. So let's look at what does God do for us when we are in a difficult situation. Because this is talked a lot more in the Bible. This is talked about a lot more in the Bible than what we should be doing. So let's look at Psalm 73, 25, and 26. Our first. Psalm 73, 25, and 26.
Whom have I in heaven but you? And there is none upon earth that I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever.
So I think it's important for us, and I think this is what happens with those who were strong that we read about, for us to be searching who God is and how He can strengthen us when we're weak. And I think this is what this verse is talking about. But if we wait until the time where we need the strength the most, I think we lose part of that time to our own thoughts and our own feelings about what the situation is. So I think it's really important that as Christians, we spend time in the Bible. We try to study and figure out ahead of time, how do I gain the strength of God so that in the future, if I have to deal with something, which you're going to, so there's no question about whether you're going to have to deal with something or not. So we should always be looking for that strength. Let's look at 2 Corinthians 4, 17 through 18. You may read that. Second Corinthians 4, 17 through 18.
For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, works for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we look not at things which are seen, but at things which are not seen. Things which are seen are temporal, things which are not seen are eternal.
What do you think we can gain from this in a difficult situation?
This is but temporary and limited. What we might be suffering might seem great in the moment, but it is life. It's good for eternal.
Yeah, and I think this is pointing more to, instead of just one thing, this is all of our affliction in the world. And God's calling it light, or the writer here is calling it light. We don't think of it as light, obviously. And this goes back to what Kurt says. This is a short span of time for Job's life that all of a sudden things are going wrong. And it feels like, he's going to say in the next chapter, why was I born? Why would you even allow that day to occur? He goes on, and I think because we can all relate to his side of it, then it's very difficult for us to think about it as light when something happens to us. The afflictions that we suffer today, especially in service to God, this is talking in service to God. Those things are light. Those things are not important compared to the glory that we receive in the future. So we have to be careful of not giving weight to something that is giving more weight. I mean, obviously we should give weight to things on earth, but We need to refocus our minds on the spiritual, on the weight of the glory that awaits. And then the last verse we'll look at is Psalms 23:4. Read that. Psalms 23, verse 4. Everybody knows this one already. So this is the evil that is being talked about here. The shadow of death. For Job, this is the shadow of death. This is the fear of evil. This is evil. As God puts it, as the writer puts it here, this is evil. So this is something that we should be clear on, that God is there to comfort us. He's not going to comfort us if we don't ask, and He's not going to comfort us if we're not in His Word. But if we want to be comforted, then He's available. He's available for those who serve Him. So I'm going to end with reading chapter 3 here, and just to leave it with you to sit for next time we meet, and we'll talk about it maybe a little here, but mostly talk about it next week. In Job chapter 3, verse 1 starts, After this opened Job his mouth and cursed his day, and Job spake and said, Let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, There is a man-child conceived. Let that day be darkness. Let not God regard it from above, neither let the light shine upon it. Let darkness and the shadow of death stain it. Let a cloud dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. As for the night, let the darkness seize upon it. Let it not be joined unto the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Lo, let that night be solitary. Let no joyful voice come therein. Let them curse it that curse the day, who are ready to raise up their mourning. Let the stars and the twilight thereof be dark. Let it look for light, but have none. Neither let it see the dawning of the day, because it shut not up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hid sorrow from mine eyes. Why did I not from the womb? Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Why did the knees prevent me? And why the beast that I should suck? For now should I have lain still and been quiet. I should have slept. Then had I been at rest. With kings and counselors of the earth, which built desolate places for themselves, or with princes that had gold, who filled their houses with silver, or as hidden untimely birth I had been, as infants which never saw light. There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary be at rest. There the prisoners rest together. They hear not the voice of the oppressor. The small and great are these, and the servant is free from his master. Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, and life unto the bitter in soul, which long for death, but it cometh not, and dig for it more than for hid treasures, which rejoice exceedingly, and are glad, and when they can find the grave. Why is light given to a man whose way is hid, and whom God hath edged in? For my sign cometh before I eat, and my roarings are poured out like waters. For the thing which I greatly feared is come upon me, and that which I have prayed of is come unto me. I was not in safety, neither had I rest, neither was I quiet, yet trouble came. So what I want you to think about for the next time we meet is, what are the things that Job says here that are true? And what here does he not understand about God's creation and about who God is? Because I think there's both in there. But there's a lot that Job lets us know. It's not something we can look down on and see that obviously he is wrong, except that we have this entire Bible to teach us, which he didn't have. But I think there's some things that we need to understand here, that some of the things that his friends see, I think, are the truth. They're who God is, but God in the end says that they're wrong, and they need to be, they need Job to pray for them in order for their sacrifices to be accepted. So for the next time we meet, I hope you think about chapter 3. We'll try to get through all of chapter 3 next time we meet. But I think there's a lot of things in there that we can see that Job is going to get confronted about in the last few chapters by God. And so you might, again, go and read those last 2 or 3 chapters of Job to see what those are. I appreciate your time and attention.